This year, BRICS Summit held in Kazan highlighted and yet becomes one of the most powerful shifts that challenge traditional Western narratives in Africa and beyond. While we've seen some African leaders often vocalized a desire for autonomy and Pan-African cooperation, I can say this summit revealed stark contrasts between their words and the actionable alliances emerging under the BRICS umbrella. Just imagine a room filled with leaders representing nearly half of the world's population, standing united not just for economic cooperation, but to challenge the very power structures that have dominated the globe for decades.
We must look at what is in our best interest. In other words, our relationship with Russia must be defined in a manner that is beneficial to us, and Russia must also define what is beneficial to them, and we meet in the middle.
The 2024 BRICS Summit in Kazan, Russia, brings together this formidable group of nations, signaling that Western dominance is weakening and a new era of alliances is emerging. Africa's presence at this summit is more than symbolic. It is a testament to the continent's potential to shape its destiny outside the grip of former colonial powers.
Excellency President Vladimir Putin, Your Excellencies leaders of BRICS nations, Your Excellencies leaders of global and regional institutions, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, honorable ministers and excellencies. Allow me to begin by congratulating President Putin on chairing a very successful BRICS summit, as well as leading us all to adopt an excellent declaration from this summit. The BRICS outreach and BRICS Plus engagements are important platforms for developing strong ties amongst countries from greater global south and emerging markets. We should use these platforms to foster meaningful engagement. We should use the BRICS platform to contribute to social, economic, cultural development of our peoples. We welcome the Russian initiatives that are aimed at strengthening a number of BRICS countries through the various measures that they have put on the table, such as transport networks and connectivity. This in many ways will help to find ways to integrate and deepen our interconnectedness in new and imaginative ways. The African Continental Free Trade Area will make a huge contribution itself to unlock opportunities for trade and investment for local and global businesses. It will create a number of opportunities that will lead to an integrated and connected continent. The Single African Air Transport Market is another flagship project of the African Union Agenda 2063. This is an initiative of the African Union to create a single unified air transport market in Africa to support the continent's economic integration. For BRICS and friends of BRICS, we need to use these projects to further connect the greater global south. The promotion of greater regional connectivity and trade facilitation can only succeed in an environment of peace and stability. Excellencies, South Africa is concerned about the military action by the State of Israel against the people of Gaza, which we have characterized as genocide, is deeply concerning. This genocide led South Africa to approach the International Court of Justice with a view to stopping the killing of innocent women and children in Gaza. We do believe that the world cannot just sit by and watch the slaughter of innocent people continuing. South Africa has been unwavering in its support towards all efforts aimed at the establishment of a viable Palestinian state, existing side by side in peace with Israel, within internationally recognized borders based on the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital. And this will be in line with all UN resolutions, international law, and internationally agreed parameters. We do call on the international community and the United Nations Security Council to address this spiraling conflict. On our own continent, Africa, Sudan enters its second year of horrific conflict and devastation. This is another conflict that the world seems to have forgotten about. The protracted conflicts in the Sahel and Great Lakes regions in Africa persist. We must find lasting solutions to all these conflicts. We must remain committed to the peaceful resolution of all disputes through negotiation and inclusive dialogue. And we must safeguard the ability of states to pursue independent foreign policy. And we must safeguard the multilateral system, because it is the cornerstone of international relations that fosters an environment of peace and development. Existing global institutional mechanisms need to be both strengthened and reformed to play a constructive role in the international peace and security. We cannot allow conflicts just to continue in perpetuity. We do need to find paths to peace. In our quest for a long, interconnected, just and prosperous world, we have the ability to foster an environment of peace through a focus on sustainable development. We must also continue to support nations and peoples who seek to end the cycle of conflict and choose the path of peace. I thank you.
All hail thee to Cyril Ramaphosa for speaking up against, and a call for action on conflicts ravaging not only the Africa continent, but concerned on what is happening in Gaza. Well, Ramaphosa's speech might sound bold, but let's really break it down. He celebrates BRICS as a powerful alliance, encouraging African nations to resist Western control. Still sounds good, right? But here's the twist. How does South Africa lead this charge when it's still economically tied to the West? Ramaphosa hypes up African unity, yet South Africa relies heavily on Western investments and loans. Is he truly standing up for Africa, or is this just more political theater? And what about the African Continental Free Trade Area? Ramaphosa praises it as a game changer, yet how effective can it really be if Africa's biggest economies continue to struggle under corruption and slow reform?
Amongst ourselves, we don't trade. We don't add value to our goods. If you look at intra-African trade now, it is below 20%, the lowest anywhere in the world. Yet potentially, we have a market of nearly 1.5 billion peoples. So we are saying that it is an organized Africa, organized as contemplated under the Lagos Plan of Action, organized as contemplated under Africa Agenda 2063 and Africa Continental Free Trade Area, that is then ready to engage the world. So that when they engage the world, they are engaging the world from a position of strength. When they are in BRICS, then they are doing so in a manner that enables them to speak at the same level with Brazil, with Russia, with China, and of course with India. And it is a partnership of equals. Otherwise, if Africa is weak, our relationship is like the relationship between a horse and the rider. And in my metaphor, Africa will be the horse and the others will be the riders. And it is something that is desirable, and I do not understand even BRICS to be saying we are not going to work with the United States of America. We are not going to work with Europe. We are going to work with everybody in the world, but from a position of mutual respect and strength for mutual benefit, so that the relationship will be symbiotic rather than parasitic. And Africa has been beaten times without number. But somehow, she's never shy. She still enters into traps which are so very obvious, which is what we must avoid if we are not to be eaten for breakfast by other civilizations.
How many times have we heard grand promises about free trade and economic independence that never materialize? If African leaders are so committed to economic freedom, why is so little changing on the ground? When he condemns Israel's actions in Gaza, calling it genocide, he appears principled. The devastating conflicts in Sudan, the Sahel, and other regions is also genocide and seem forgotten even by other leaders. It's powerful to stand up for human rights, but does it feel genuine if you're ignoring massive human suffering in your own backyard too? Ramaphosa also speaks about peaceful solutions and the need for global reform, calling for equality on the world stage. Yet, how can Africa demand fairness from the world while its own leaders fail to reform and tackle corruption? Shouldn't the focus be on solving African issues at home before calling for global change? Could this even be the reason why International Court of Justice, never value less alone, acknowledged the fact that he's looking to resolve Gaza conflict? Here's the big question. Are African leaders truly ready to change the continent's future, or are they simply giving speeches that make them look like heroes? When you approached International Court of Justice concerning this issue, were you taken seriously? Like, do you think they value you? That being said, do you believe BRICS can find lasting solution to these conflicts? Again, leaders like Cyril Ramaphosa claim to advocate for a self-reliant Africa, yet South Africa's deep-rooted economic ties to Western entities may hinder such declarations from reaching fruition. Meanwhile, the expansion of BRICS, which now includes 11 member states, brings countries like Iran into the fold, amplifying discussions on sovereignty and alternative pathways for development that bypass Western-led financial structures like the IMF. As Putin showcased Russia's role as a formidable ally for these nations, the summit made it clear African countries have viable options outside of Western influence, but can their leaders commit to pursuing them? African leaders must ask themselves, will they align with BRICS to foster true economic independence, or will their alliances remain superficial, diluted by Western economic dependencies? It's hard not to wonder if leaders like IbrahimTraore, who defiantly pushes against ECOWAS control, represent the kind of leadership Africa truly needs right now. His stance speaks louder than words, challenging Western influence, prioritizing Africa's sovereignty, and urging the continent to forge its own alliances. In stark contrast, many other African leaders may be talking the talk, but are they willing to walk the walk? At the BRICS Summit, Putin's agenda showed them a path forward, but will African leaders even take the first step? The BRICS Summit isn't just an alliance of nations, it's a litmus test for African leaders. Will they seize this moment to genuinely uplift their countries, or will they continue to placate Western interests while claiming loyalty to their people? But what does this mean for Africa? As Western sanctions, particularly those imposed on Russia after its invasion of Ukraine, continue to bite, the BRICS nations have started openly discussing ways to bypass Western economic structures like the IMF and the dominance of the US dollar. Why should Africa continue to rely on Western financial institutions that have time and time again plunged the continent into debt traps and economic instability? This summit is just a critical juncture. African nations now have the opportunity to explore alternative economic pathways. But are the leaders representing the people, or are they still tied to the corrupt practices that keep them in power? It's worth asking, will this new world order truly benefit African citizens, or will it be just another stage for political elites to enrich themselves? The presence of African leaders in Kazan sends a clear message to the West. Africa is not just a spectator in global affairs, it's an active player. Yet it also raises a haunting question. If they are willing to break free from the chains of corruption and external influence, or continue the cycle of exploitation under a different banner? You can tell that Vladimir Putin's smile as he welcomed these leaders is more than a diplomatic gesture. It's a signal that Russia is not as isolated as the West would like to portray. After all, Russia and China have their own strategic interests in Africa, often driven by resource extraction and military cooperation.